And we would like your support to reform drug-free school zones. That is Senate Bill 259, an act, what is it called? An act concerning the recommendation of Connecticut Sentencing Commission regarding the enhanced penalty for the sale or possession of drugs near schools, daycare centers, and public housing. Although this bill may sound nice in that it's drug-free school zone bill, it actually is very harmful to our communities, especially our urban communities. It's harmful in rural and suburban communities because in between 2010 and 2011, 68% of overdose deaths were done by white males ages 15 to 25. And they died because there was no services in their areas and there was no support. Drug-free school zones in urban areas are overlapping. It includes public housing, and we all know who lives in public housing. And what we want to urge you is to support reducing it from 1,500 feet, which is 5 football fields, to 200 feet from the perimeter of school property out. And that way we can keep our schools drug-free and make sure that people in the community who are addicted to drugs actually get the treatment that they need. And if it's 1,500 feet and they can't get access to treatment, prison is not an option.
This is Steve with wearechangect, Connecticut. I'm here with LaResse Harvey at A Better Way Foundation in New Britain, Connecticut. LaResse, can you tell us a little bit about what A Better Way Foundation does and the work they do?
A Better Way Foundation is a nonprofit organization, 501c3, that works on ending the war on drugs, ending mass incarceration, and we do that through providing community information as well as changing policy outcomes and through treatment versus incarceration. And our motto is those who are highly affected by it should be the leaders on the issue.
Now, it says you're the director of strategic relocations. Relations.
Yeah.
What does that mean exactly?
Well, that's a very nice way of saying that I have relationships with everybody from people in the governor's office to people on the street. So I provide making interconnections between someone in the community with different folks, either in social systems, criminal justice system, helping them, actually they help me more than I help them, crafting out policies that will have a profound positive effect on their lives, because the more people in the community are empowered and take charge over policies and hold politicians accountable, the better it is for the quality of their life.
Nice, I like that. That sounds beautiful. I read that you were formerly incarcerated before you started doing your community outwork reach, and assuming that you saw the situation you were in and you probably didn't like it, which made you want to do something about the way the system is, because I've been through the system myself and the system is not fair. So you want to tell us how you were able to turn your life around and actually do something and enact some change within the system?
So my advocacy work actually starts when I'm like 15 years old as a teen mom. And I didn't like the way the doctors and different people treated me just because I was a teenager and I had a child. They did not respect me as a parent. So I got involved with New Britain's youth parenting program, and I became a peer professional with some other teen parents. And we went around the state advocating about, we have a right as parents and stuff like that. And so the Children's Act of 1988 is like we were part of this national movement. So that was my first experience with advocacy. When I got incarcerated, I was incarcerated because I defended myself in front of my apartment on Willow Street, which at the time was a highly drug infested area. And I defended myself. Well, Connecticut doesn't have a stand your ground kind of law, and their self-defense law, it leaves one to be desired, like if you can actually defend your own property in your home and your family in state of Connecticut. And so without going to jail. When the police came, I didn't think I was wrong. When I went to, the police arrest me and they were like, well, tell us what happened. I told them what happened. And it was kind of like, I'm telling it thinking I'm right. I had the right to defend myself. I had the right to, as a parent, as a mother, defend my children, defend where I live. And when I realized I was getting charged with murder, I was like, how is this murder? I had no intention of killing her. I didn't even have an intention of really hurting her. In the system, because I was poor, because, I was a welfare mom, I was black, I was in a highly drug-infested area. If the cops came when they were originally called, Tammy would have never got killed. That experience had led me to, while I was incarcerated, the way that I was treated. Like, I got raped by another person that was incarcerated. We don't like to call people inmates and ex-offenders and ex-convicts and stuff like that, because you tend to have an image of someone when you use those words, and that's disrespectful to the people who have been incarcerated. It's disrespectful to the people who are currently incarcerated. It allows us to dehumanize people, and then we don't want to take the responsibility of the messed up condition that they are once they get home, and again continues to self-medicate and stuff. And so the things that happened to me while I was incarcerated, some weren't all bad, some were good. The things that were afforded to me in the 1990s, is not afforded to the people now today. And I'm trying to ensure that that stuff is available. And those things that are not available, that didn't exist, that we needed when I was incarcerated. And I still connect with people who are in jail. I'm still connected to people in the federal penitentiary, people who are locally here in the state. When they come out, from juveniles to adults, men, women. I work with people who were incarcerated for a long period of time. We have a group we call the Phoenix Association. I work with everybody. Like, to talk about what got me involved is like, I really don't want to make it about me, because if it wasn't for a Better Way Foundation, I wouldn't have a voice. And I want to make sure that there's a Better Way Foundation available to anyone who was like in my situation, regardless if you were incarcerated or not. If anything that anything you think is any system that's coming against you, you can call on Better Way Foundation, and we'll be there to help you through that, to help you navigate that system. That's what being a strategic director and formerly incarcerated is about for me, in a long way.
Well, I know you said you don't want to make this about you, but I'm looking through what you have done in the state of Connecticut, and I would just like to talk about it. It says you removed the "have you been convicted of a felony" question from the local and state public job applications. You decriminalized small amounts of marijuana and brought a palliative marijuana program to Connecticut. And it also says you want to expand access to Narcan for people who could prevent an overdose. Would you like to talk about how you were able to get some of this through?
Okay, so the legislative process is in Connecticut, is in even years, it's a short session like now. And in odd years, it's a longer session. So in odd years, it's from January to June. In a short year, it's from February to May. And so everything gets crammed in, it's crunched, committee dates and things like that. So I learned how to pass legislation through a Better Way Foundation. So I learned how to go to the Capitol, follow a bill, how to submit, get a legislator to support policies that you want change. I learned how to do all that stuff with a Better Way Foundation. But how we do it is that we don't do it as an individual. We do it as a community, as a society. So we have over 250 community leaders in all 8 counties. And we have folks that we work with day to day. Then we have people we call cultural agents who are trained in the language and contribute to the language of the legislation that we are proposing. That all happens because people hold their politicians accountable. Whoever is elected, regardless if you voted for them or not, once they're in that position, they represent you. And you want them to represent the you that you want to see come out of the Capitol that affects your life. Not represent the you that they think because they know better, because they don't know better than you. You know better than them because you're living your life. So a lot of the stuff we pass is not because we thought it was a great idea. It's because people in the community said, wait a minute, but we need to add this. So like, for example, the overdose death prevention bill that was passed, well, it passed the House and the Senate pretty much unanimously, right? And so people are like, what is that about? And so we were saying to allow doctors to be able to prescribe Narcan, which stops an opioid overdose. So like if you're on heroin or you take Vicodin or oxycodone or cotton, regardless if you're in a school or in a community who have either lost someone to overdose death or because of Narcan that they got, quote unquote, at the time illegally because it wasn't prescribed to them and administered to save their kid's life or their loved one's life, like we hooked up with them and we start educating them on drug policy and how it affects and how it's, you know, discriminatory and things like that. And they jumped on board with us. So as a society, we come together and make these policy changes. That's why it's not a one person thing, it's in a better way thing, you know? And so, and it's like people benefit as individuals. They feel like they have control over their life because they participate with a Better Way Foundation, and that they make a big difference, not just in their homes, but in their community in a larger way. We were the first ones, I believe, in the country to have our Good Sam 911 to include alcohol and all illicit drugs, not just heroin. So like you can call 911 in Connecticut if you think somebody is alcohol poisoning, if you think somebody is freaking out on dust or wet, or if you think somebody got a hold of bad PCP, it don't make a difference. When you call 911, if there's paraphernalia or drugs, the cops are supposed to just come in, take that stuff out, and, you know, ask questions about what did that person take, and no one's supposed to get arrested. And if they do get arrested, they're not supposed to be prosecuted because they did it for a medical emergency. And people need to know that.
How I found out about you, I was reading about the drug-free zones, with the schools and the daycares and within the limits of project housing. And I found out in 1987 that Connecticut passed one of the most harshest and draconian drug-free zone laws in the U.S., which held a 3-year mandatory minimum prison sentence for any drug offense within 1,000 feet of a school. And then it was expanded to 1,500 feet, which is, I found out, is the equivalent of 5 football fields. 1,500 feet within a school, 5 football fields without the end zones. That's a little crazy. That's like the whole town, just about, you know. And I was reading, it said in New Haven, the only non-drug free zone is the Yale golf course.
Yeah.
With
it's
all
a corner, not even the full golf course, just a corner of it.
What have you dealt with on this, and why do you think this is such a asinine policy to begin with?
Because it's a nice, cliche, kind of cliquey, kind of, you know, nice ring to your ear. Drug-free school zone. Like, yeah, we don't want no drug dealers selling at our schools to our kids and stuff like that. But it's like when an entire place is supposed to be a special place, no place is special, right? And so why would you have public housing unless you're targeting a specific group of people? Because who lives in most of the public housing that we have in Connecticut? Well, most of the people that live in public housing are blacks and Latinos. And who thinks that they know better than black and Latino families? Well, I'll leave that to the audience to decide. But it's a class thing. It's a race thing. You know, there are people who are like, oh, but we don't want drug dealers. We need to protect our kids. What's the problem? It should be, the whole state should be a drug-free school zone. And it's like, No, because the people who get charged with it, who get caught up in it, not all of them are drug dealers. Only a few people are actually drug dealers that get caught. They are the addicts of our community. These are the mothers and the fathers and the sisters and the brothers, like just like the overdose death folks. It's the same group of people that get incarcerated, and not all of them get treatment while they're in jail. I wish we could eradicate it, to be honest, because it's an unnecessary law. And what I mean by that is, if we're talking about protecting our kids, there's 2 laws in Connecticut that no matter where that kid is, if you try to get that kid to sell or you try to get that kid to use drugs, you're facing a mandatory 3 to 5 years, regardless of where that kid is. But if it was about the sanctuary of the school, then we understand that. So why is it that most of those arrests happen in the evening when there's nobody and they're not near schools all the time? And so having a full area beyond a school, and public housing into people's houses and stuff like that, it's like you're not talking about people who are selling to children. You're talking about people who are possessing, because that's the other part of the bill people don't talk about. Everybody want to focus on the drug dealer. It says possession and paraphernalia is with that, who are taxpayers, who are homeowners, who are, property owners, who have businesses or, work for some, body or whatever. Now our whole family's disrupted. We got to go to court. If we can't afford bond, or our family can't afford bond, we're stuck in jail waiting for trial. Then the prosecutor says, hey, listen, you looking at 15 years, we can make it 18 months if you just plead down to this and agree that, you take the 18 months and then, it's like this cycle. And I know it sounds like erroneous and crazy, but guess what? That's what happens in a community like New Britain. That's what happened in a community like Hartford, New Haven, Bridgeport, every day. There is no conversation when you live in an urban community. There's a conversation if you live in a white community, and that's why it's not a good law. And at no time is there a child involved. And I understand we need to keep our school grounds safe from drug paraphernalia, dime bags, needles, everything. But you ask yourself this question. Since 1990s, how much has drug sale increased in the black market? And how much has it decreased? In the state of Connecticut, it has decreased by almost 49%. Drug sales has decreased. So where are the drug dealers, is my question. And why do we have a drug dealing law on the books that only over-incarcerates minorities and undermines our ability to get people with addiction the help they need?
So how do you feel about mandatory minimums? And go.
That's a nerve for me. When the truth about the war on drugs, mandatory minimums is not the answer. It does not give the judges an opportunity to deal with people on an individual basis. It does not give our criminal justice system, even the police department, the ability to actually help people who are in a crisis. It actually hurts our community. It costs taxpayers too much money, and it destroys families. We talk about the breakdown of the family unit. These mandatory minimums kill our family unit. Drug war kills our family unit. Drug-free school zones kills our family unit, especially in poor and minority households.
So what do you think the solution to the war on drugs is?
Revise everything, put your money back in education, after school programs, health services. A lot of hurting people self-medicate. That's why they use illicit drugs. We need to educate people, and that's something that A Better Way is doing now with our public wellness campaign memo that we wrote out. Our memo that we disseminated on January 1st, this day that Obamacare became legal, or Affordable Care Act became legal in this country. And what it says is that now is the time to heal, and we need to decriminalize all drugs. in order to get people the help that they need, and that is mental health and substance use disorder help. And we need to have that money that we have used over $40 trillion. I'm at $1 trillion over 40 years. We have used $1 trillion to end a war that has no end. As long as we have inhumane policies in place like drug-free school zones. As long as we continue to think that the big-time drug dealer is on the corner and not in government. Because the big-time drug dealer is Pfizer. The big-time drug dealer is our DEA. You know, the big-time drug dealer is CIA. And it's not a conspiracy theory. You see it all the time in the news. Watch CNN, MSN. Even if you watch Fox News, they talk about it. You know, we don't deal with conspiracy theories. We understand it because we live it daily. Imagine being able to walk down the street without having fear of anything. Our society has been traumatized. Urban centers have been traumatized. We have cells in our high schools, not books. We have security and guns in our high schools, not books. We're wasting money on the wrong things. And I understand we need safety and security, but let's be wise about this. If people got the medical attention they need, mental health, PTSD services, if you ever been incarcerated, you have post-traumatic stress disorder. You don't realize that because nobody's talking to you about that. But if you think about some of the ways you respond to things, it's PTSD. I'm a social worker. I know. I talk to a lot of veterans who self-medicate. They say because they live in certain areas, it's like being in a war zone again. Well, those certain areas are the urban areas. And it's not because of the shootouts that happen in the street. It's because of police sirens that they hear on a regular basis. It's really interesting, them banging on the wrong doors, and nobody talks to our kids, and they're being traumatized. I mean, I get in a fight at school, and you're going to put me in a little closet, little room, and say it's a holding room as a timeout room. And it's like there are people who get their kids taken away for putting their kids in closets bigger than that. And it's like we accept that in a high school. That's what's happening in New Britain High School. We need to close that down. That should not be happening. You know, those kids need therapy. They don't need a prison sentence. You know, I mean, I'm going on and on, but that's how big the problem is, that we have allowed the drug war to infiltrate our education system, and we call it zero tolerance. And it's like, no, that's prison. You're preparing them for prison, not college. What happened to preparing our kids for college instead of prison? Like, and we think that's okay. It's not okay. New Britain, our office, A Better Ways office is in New Britain for a reason. I'm from New Britain. But, that's just one thing. But New Britain is an urban center that is 10 years behind a lot of other urban communities in the state of Connecticut. Because you cannot have a holding cell in Hartford, New Haven, or Bridgeport without the community, the urban, like the Black and Latinos, going crazy. Like, you gotta be kidding me. Well, when I started asking questions about this, I realized that a lot of Black and Latino families in New Britain didn't even know there was a holding cell inside New Britain High School, that their kids were being kicked out because, being classified as behavioral problem, but they have been traumatized because they have been bullied by teachers and security guards, and they got an issue with authority because the people in authority, what happened to their zero tolerance? Like, who's watching the people supposed to be overseeing our kids? They are out of control. And so, the community is saying, wait a minute, we want to change this. A Better Way Foundation is an infrastructure you can use to make that change happen. And we're partnering with the NAACP and stuff, but it's like, really? It was the parents that came to us and was like, it was the kids first. I did, the kids. They were like, the youth was like, wait a minute, miss. They got cells for us too. I was like, what? So when you talk about me being formerly incarcerated, how does that impact the work that I do? When I hear that from a 14-year-old, a 15-year-old, a 17-year-old kid going to a high school saying, yeah, I dropped out of school to go to a Del Ed because I was tired of them putting me in the holding cell, you like, wait a minute. This thing is bigger than just policy. This is a mindset that they have created. They have created communities of, we call them incarcerated communities. They are mentally incarcerated. So how do you heal a mentally incarcerated society? Public Wellness said you give them the tools that they need and you tell them where to point and fight and get what they need. Fight for that. Fight for no cells in your school. You have that right. And then fight for those resources that was going into that security stuff to be reallocated and make sure you got a book to read, to make sure you got more teachers in smaller classes, to make sure that you build a whole new high school. I mean, it's a small city in that high school. Almost 3,000 kids go there. That's too small for one high school. You need 2 high schools. And then East Gum Tech is a technical school. But it's like you need another public high school and stop trying to, take taxpayers' money and spend it on overhead when you can be spending it where it needs to be on the kids, And so, I would just want to tangent because it's like, for me, if we don't heal our hearts and our minds, as a society, we are not going to heal. We need to rethink about what is safety for us. And we need to think less about police, stringent laws, and more about us being human. And what A Better Way Foundation does is treat people like human beings and give them the tools that they already have, but give them an infrastructure so that they can have the space and the authority to take action. And that's all we do. And yes, it takes strategy. You need to be strategic about it, but it is very personal for me, very personal, and maybe that's because I actually care about the people. Not everybody does.
No, they don't. Now, if somebody needs to get a hold of A Better Way Foundation, or if they need your help, if they want to actually volunteer some time with you, what can they do to get a hold of you guys? And
okay, so A Better Way Foundation has a website. It's www.A as in Apple, B as in boy, W as in woman, F as in Frank, C as in Connecticut, T as in Tom, .org. And you can email us at, info@abwfct.org. We have a link for donations and stuff. If you want to personally get a hold of me, I'm just going to, I know this is, I don't know who's going to get it, but my cell phone is 860-270-9585. That's 860-270-9585. We have an office phone. It's 860-223-9328. And again, we need more volunteers. We need more people to step up. We need more people to be committed to come to meetings. We have our core, but we're always willing to expand our family. We have helped other organizations start and stuff. We have an associate nonprofit lobbying company. It's the first and only one I know of in the United States, and definitely in Connecticut. It's the one I start. It's called Civic Trust Public Lobbying Company. It's membership only, and we offer free lobbying services to our members. And A Better Way Foundation is a member, obviously. And those are like the statewide policy changes that we do runs through Civic Trust Public Lobbying. We have civic engagement trainings through that. Through A Better Way Foundation, we do leadership development, education, outreach. Like we have a health consumers guide on how to enroll into Access Health CT that we partner with Community Partners in Action that will be released out this month. And we also have a health consumers guide on just how to be a health consumer, because the same population of people that's been overly incarcerated that now has expanded, the working poor and lower class people who have expanded Medicaid now, like top 10 health essentials is substance use disorder, i.e. addiction, and mental health services are fully covered. And so educating people on how to choose a primary care doctor, things like that. People don't know that. Like, they don't know that they have a right to control their whole health and their being. So we have a consumer guide that we're going to be releasing. And yeah, we need, you know, we always need donations. We're a nonprofit, right? And so in order to keep this going, 80% of the money we collect goes back into the community so that we can offer free services. We're not very top-heavy administrative, and we would like to expand and hire more formerly incarcerated people, but in order to do that, we need more resources to come in. And because, you know what, it takes a village to raise a family, it takes a village to raise an organization too. And so we're flying high with the community, and we trust that they'll support us.
We're advocating for a change in the drug policy, which is a failure on its own terms. We are not pro-drug by any means, but we think a rational public health model, drug policy will be more effective at keeping people from using drugs, abusing drugs, being damaged by drugs. And education is much more effective in substance abuse reduction than punishment and incarceration.
I'm retired from the NYPD. I retired as a lieutenant. I was a detective, and I worked undercover in narcotics. I went out on the streets of Manhattan and the Bronx, and I bought drugs. All in the war on drugs. I was a good soldier in the war on drugs. Many, many years later, I've come to realize that the war on drugs, which is still going on, isn't working. I'm an attorney. I represented so many young people charged with possessing drugs, illegal drugs, selling them, and they were facing years and years in prison, all for nonviolent conduct.